Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Benjamin, and welcome to RPG Basics Part 32. In our last episode, we added a new sword to the game so that the character, when he attacked, he would use a specific sword image. And I kind of showed you how that could be used to maybe trade sword items. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that, and we're going to fix a couple little bugs. So first we're going to start off fixing the bugs, but I wanted to say that we're going to be changing the way a few things work, so you'll want to pay close attention to make sure that you follow along. Let's get started. The first thing that we're going to change and the first bug that we're going to fix is inside of the pause menu object. So come inside the pause menu object and come inside the step event. And the issue that you guys reminded me of is that this right here uses the down key, which doesn't actually, with our get input, it doesn't actually work with the controller. So these weren't working with the controller. So you'll just want to do an OR sign right there. You can also type in the word OR, but I'm going to use that. Or object input dot y-axis is greater than 0.5. So that will get the axis of the controller gamepad, and we can navigate our menu using the gamepad. And we'll want to do the same thing down here. Or object input.y-axis is less than negative 0.5. Okay? Once we have that, we should be able to navigate the menu using the controller. We're also going to want to make some changes to our input object. So middle click on the input object here and it will open it up. And we can come inside of it and go into the script get input. We're going to change a couple things here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new variable here. So this one's going to be called swap key, and we'll just do gamepad. Hold up, let's just copy one of these right here. Actually, I'm going to copy this one right here. Okay. Gamepad button check pressed, GP face 3. We'll change that to 4, so that should be Y. Now what we're going to do is we're going to copy this pause key right here, Control C. And I'm going to paste it at the end here. So we've got two pause keys right now. We're going to change this one so that instead of using the Z key, it uses VK escape. So we're going to use escape to pause. That makes more sense. I don't know why we were using the Z key before. And up here, we're going to change this. It's not going to say pause key anymore. It's going to say swap key. And we're going to be using this to swap weapons. Okay. Now that we've got the input done, we need to handle the way that we do these objects here. So, before we had a weapon animation parent, and this system wasn't too bad. We had an object sword and we could change objects. But I came up with a slightly less complicated way. So what we're going to do is we're just going to rename this object weapon animation. And that's it. We're going to press OK. And we're going to delete the sword here. Okay. So we just have object weapon animation. Now we're going to come into the player. And we're going to make some more minor changes here. Instead of having a weapon, we're just going to have a weapon sprite. And we're going to say we're going to set that to sprite sword. Okay. Then we need to go into the player's attack state. So come into the attack state. Instead of creating weapon here, what we're going to do is we're going to create object weapon animation, right? But we're going to set that weapon sprite. So attack animation dot sprite index equals weapon sprite, which is the sprite that we're storing inside the character. So the reason I'm doing this is because we're going to have objects on the ground that you can swap with, right? Weapons on the ground that you can pick up and it trades for your current weapon. And I was thinking, what's really the only thing that's going to change right now? And the only thing that changes is the sprite. So there's really no reason to store a whole bunch of different variables and try and worry about creating and objects and deleting objects when we swap. And there was a whole bunch of stuff I was getting into. So, and later, if we want to, we can start storing things like how much extra damage this weapon does. Is the weapon a little bit slower so that our attack goes slower? We can start doing things like that and storing those, but for now, this seems like a good way to do it. So, this is, to go a little bit further here, this system is a really simple inventory, and it's probably the inventory that I recommend for beginners, which is just a swap system. Your character has an item, and when they find another one on the ground, if you pick that item up, it trades your current item for the one that you found on the ground. And there's some interesting kind of game design things that you can think about with this system, which is that when a character or a player finds a new weapon, the decision of whether or not to pick up that weapon sometimes is a little bit harder, because you have to give up the weapon that you have. So it's always a trade. You can't keep both. And so there's some reasons why this can work well in games and has worked well in games before. And it's the easiest to program, so it's a good place to start. Okay? So now that we've got that set up, we're going to go into the move state, and we're going to add in our swapping. But we also need to change, we need to create a new object down here. So create a new object and name this object Object Weapon Item. So this is going to be the one that they find on the ground. And we'll set this one for now. We'll just give it a sprite of, we need the axe. So let me save the axe sprite real quick here. And you guys, if you don't have this one, I'll put a link in the description just in case. I think I sent it out with the other links, but I'm not sure. So let's duplicate the sword sprite, load a sprite, and I'm just going to go to my desktop and load the axe right here. And we'll name this sprite axe. And I know axe can be spelled without an E or with an E. So whichever way you like to spell it, go for it. Okay. Now that we have that, we can set the sprite here. And we can put this object in the room. So come down to our first room and put it right here. Wherever you want to. Now I'm going to make it a physics object so we can push it around and stuff. And I'm going to give it a circle, modify collision shape. I'm just going to put it like right here and make it really small, like that. This will allow us to move the item a little bit, but it won't necessarily make it like an exact collision. So because we did that, we have to add a collision. If we want collisions, we have to add a collision with the lifeform parent. And just put in a code here that says collide. And then come into the lifeform parent and add a collision with the weapon item and do the same thing. Just name it collide. Now we should be able to push it around on the ground, kind of interact with it. Now that we have that set up, we need to write a script that will swap the items. Okay? So the easy thing here is all we really need to do is change sprites for now in our swap item script. So create a new script, and I'm going to open up my reference one here. Script swap weapons. And we'll just call it new weapon. The argument that we pass in. We're going to say var new weapon. If I can spell, I don't know what I was typing there. Equals argument 0. And then we need to store a temporary, we need a temporary variable. Whenever you swap two things, you generally need a temporary one so that you can store that. So let me show you how this works. This is really common programming logic. So var temp equals weapon sprite. So that's the variable that our character has, which right now is set to sprite sword, right? So we're storing that in the temp. Then we're going to say weapon sprite equals new weapon dot sprite index. Okay, so we're going to get the sprite index of the new weapon that we're swapping to, and then we're going to set the new weapon dot sprite index equal to temp. So we've just traded places, right? The sprite that was on the weapon on the ground is now the sprite that our character is going to use when it attacks, and the sprite that we were using to attack with before has now replaced the weapon on the ground. So now we come into the move state, and inside of here we need a new if block. So we're going to say if object input dot swap key. We're going to do this logic isn't too tricky. We're just going to get the closest weapon to us. So always swap with the closest weapon. So var nearest weapon equals instance nearest x, y. I'm going to add 4 to the y because our player's origin is a little bit strange. It's centered. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to. We'll just leave it. It should look fine. Object weapon item. So we're getting the closest weapon item to us in the room. Then we're going to say if place meeting x, y. This one I do like to add 4 to. Nearest weapon. Nearest weapon. Then we're just going to swap. Script swap weapons and then pass in nearest weapon. Okay. Now let's try it. Let's run our game. Let's test all the changes that we made. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. I probably did, but okay. So the gamepad, I'm using a controller right now. It now works here. Let's return back to the game. There's our item on the ground. We can push it around. And then if we press Y on a gamepad, it should swap. And now when we attack, we're using the axe instead of the sword. We can swap back. And that is basic swap logic. Now there's one more glitch I want to fix, which is if you attack and the enemy hits you like that, you can see the weapon doesn't follow the player. So it's a really simple thing to fix. Just come into the weapon animation, add an event, add an end step event. This will make it follow the player better if you use an end step event because of the timing of how that works. And just say follow the player if instance exists. We want to make sure the player object exists. Object player. Else. We're actually going to destroy it if the player doesn't exist. Instance destroy. But if it does exist, x equals object player.x, y equals object player.y. And that should fix that little glitch as well. And I'm excited in the next video. I've got, like I said, I've got a buddy of mine working on some sprites for this. So we'll be swapping out for some neat looking sprites. They're a little bit bigger, so that's going to be kind of a process. And I wanted to clean up these little things in this video first before we worried about doing that. So, and you can see the axe does follow now. One more thing that you might do actually, real quick before we end the video, is the enemy doesn't have very much knockback. And that's because, so how heavy an object is basically determined by how many pixels are on it inside the collision box, I think, actually. And so, and since the enemy slime, or the four-legged little rabbit enemy thing moves kind of fast, we might want to lower its density. And what that will do is it will just make it a lighter object so that when we hit it with our sword, it will go, there will be more knockback because it didn't have very much knockback before. So this actually allows us to kind of keep it at bay when we're hitting it. Now, how much knockback you want an enemy to have is a game design decision that you'll want to make when you're creating your enemies. And so that's one way that you can affect that. And that's not necessarily the only way or always the best way, but in this case it seems to work pretty good. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your feedback and support. If you liked this video, be sure and share it, give it a thumbs up, and I will talk to you guys later.